Hello, grade 11. Nice to see you again, well and sound, and today we're going to continue our study of American realistic literature with slave narrative. So, we already discussed what the slave narrative was and what American realism was yesterday, so if you forgot, you can just revise yesterday's video, okay? As for today, I really hope you read the narrative of Frederick Douglass that I asked you to read as your homework yesterday, right? If you didn't, please pause now and spend as much time as you need to do just so. Go back to pages 536 to 549. Okay, and if you are done reading narrative of Frederick Douglass, I'm happy to introduce another narrative to you. 12 Years a Slave. I think you've heard about this one. At least I hope you've heard about the movie which was made in 2013 based on this book. Both of them were written in the 19th century. You see, Douglass wrote his book and published his book in 1845, while Solomon Northup, wrote his book in 1853, just few years after Douglass. And in his book, African American Solomon Northup, a free man, is kidnapped and forced into slavery under the name Platt for 12 years. He faces the hardships of being a slave under the hands of a few different slave owners. Some of them are sensible, some of them are, absolute monsters. And through faith, willpower, and courage, Northup must survive and endure those 12 years of slavery. Okay, so unfortunately, due to some circumstances, we're not going to watch parts of the movie as I promised yesterday. Instead, we are going to compare the summary of Solomon Northup's book to the parts of Douglass's book that you read yesterday. Okay, so now in today's lesson, you will be exposed to an HMH summary of the life of Solomon Northup as a slave, described in his book 12 Years a Slave. You will compare his life to the text that you read at home. Okay, it's just for those of you who didn't follow me before. Now, first part of his book. Okay, I will encourage you to pause now. Okay, you will press pause and you will read the blue box, okay, which gives you the summary of first two chapters of Solomon Northup's book, chapters in which he describes his man as a free man. Okay, and then you will answer the question, how was this part of Solomon's life different from Frederick's life? Pause now. Now, in the second part of his narrative, which covers chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6, okay, Solomon tells us about his captivity and the time when he was being sold to different slave owners. Okay, now you will read this summary. And what would you do in this situation? Okay, why was it important for the slavers to change Solomon's name from Solomon Northup to something called Platt? Okay, like several minutes for you. Pause now, read, think about the answer to the question, and we will go on. Yes, about the name. You see, in this situation, as a free-born man. Solomon Northup had his name, he even had a surname. And of course, what slavers are trying to do when they're changing his name from his real Solomon to something like Plot. First of all, they want to kill his free identity in him, and second thing, of course, they want his tracks, his traces to get lost. Like, for example, once upon a time there was a free man, Solomon Northup. He disappeared. Okay, if somewhere in another part of the country there appears a slave called Solomon Northup, obviously for people who, like, for example, his wife, she's trying to find him. She asks people to help her, and sooner or later someone will come up with the name Solomon Northup, and they will trace the person, they will find that there he is. While here he is just Plot. And who is this Plot? He is just a runaway slave from Georgia, as far as I remember from the book. Okay, so now Plot. And of course, but the main reason is to kill his free identity. Now, third part, his life as a slave. Okay, now you will read this summary as well, and you will tell us if this part of Solomon's life was different from or similar to the life of Frederick. Okay, so was this part of Solomon's life different from or similar to Frederick's? Pause. Okay, I'm not going to answer all the questions, especially if these questions are obvious for those who read the first text, the text that I asked you to read yesterday, right? Okay, I'm only answering questions that require some thinking outside of the book, outside of the text. Okay, now part 4, the same task. You will read the summary, and the question goes as: was this part of Solomon's life different from or similar to Frederick's? Okay, so slave under Edwin Apps. And the final part, free man again. Okay, so you read this part and you remember, even though it wasn't in the text that you read, but you also read Frederick's biography. Okay, so you read it and you watched it. So now, how was the final part of Solomon's life similar to Frederick's? Now, you see, some books deserve to be filmed and refilmed and staged and performed again and again and again. And some books, some stories are pretty difficult to be staged or filmed. And this story, 12 Years a Slave, is one of the latter. It is, so this story is pretty difficult to be shown on screen or on stage. So, but anyway, in 2013 there was a movie, okay, and the film 20 Years a Slave, based on Northup's memoir, and was released in 2013 and went on to receive acclaim in the motion picture industry. In addition to many other honors, it won 3 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actress for Lupita Nyong, who played Patsy. Indeed, actually, the book was brought to screen I would say very carefully. Okay, even though this article says that there were some differences, I would say it portrays life of slaves in great details. So if you really want to understand the hardships of slaves' life, the conditions and the sufferings that they had in that situation in the 19th century America, you should really watch this movie. Okay, so now the film is generally faithful to Northup's memoir as a whole, even lifting some dialogues directly from the memoir, including Freeman's heartless reasons for not selling Emily to William Ford. Out of necessity, though, the movie is not as concerned with factual details as Solomon Northup was. This results in shortcuts of storytelling and a muddying of facts that are often found in book-to-film adaptations. Yeah, it's normal for a movie not to represent every single detail of the book. You know, it's just impossible. After all, it's just a 2-hour movie, not a 20-episode TV series. But anyway, examples of this muddying and alterations in the plot. The slave trader Gooding is eliminated from the story completely, along with Northup's experience in his possession. The slaves Arthur and Clemens Ray are combined into one character, with the latter being rescued in New Orleans instead of the former. Northup's time with William Ford is dramatically abridged, while the role of John Tibbets is inflated for the screen. The role is combined with other minor characters and played more as a crazy man than the bitter, angry man of Northup's narrative. I don't know, actually, even in the movie he is pretty crazy and pretty bitter. Only one of the Tibbets murder attempts is shown, though it's embellished for dramatic effect. Okay, if it were, say, a TV series, especially like Turkish type TV series, then from episode to episode they would be showing how this Tibbets is trying to kill the slave, this Platt, but again, as I said before, in a 2-hour movie, it's difficult. It's really difficult to squeeze everything there. Okay, they showed once that Tibbets is trying to kill Platt, and I guess it's enough to show that he really attempts to do so. Now, both Platt's harrowing nighttime escape in the swamp and his time at Peter Tanner's plantation are eliminated completely, and some of Tanner's role is added to Epps instead. So technically the movie shows you just the picture, the portrait of a slave's life, but it doesn't show the book in great detail, but even though it gives the atmosphere of the story pretty well. The movie lays the blame for Northup's sale to Epps directly on William Ford, when in fact it was Tibbets who sold Platt to the notorious nigger breaker. Even worse, the film suggests that after Tibbets' murder attempt, Northup told the righteous Ford about his status as a free man and begged Ford to help him. According to the movie, those pleas fell on William Ford's deaf ears. The facts, however, are much different. The book shows the story completely different. And like Northup's real-life experience, the bulk of the film version of 12 Years a Slave is seen on Epps' plantation. Here, the film concerns itself chiefly with the sorrows of Patsy, and in that regard stays fairly true to the memoir. Again, I guess from my point of view, in this movie they spent a bit too much time for Patsy in the second half of the movie. It could be a bit shorter. Maybe Platt deserves more time in this movie, but movie makers thought different. However, that means that the film downplays or eliminates events in Northup's personal story and generally ignores other significant events that happened to slaves Abram, Willie, and others. Also, Northup's 8-year role as a slave whipping driver on App's farm is completely omitted, except for one brutal whipping of Patsy. Indeed, and actually I believe that in the movie it looks even stronger. Instead of just showing Platt as a whipper for 8 years, they just make him whip just one person, this Patsy, but it adds to dramatical effect on the screen rather than robs the story of something very important. Actually, I believe this was the right move. So, Henry Northup, the man who actually rescued Solomon from slavery, is not included in the film at all. The entire trial and acquittal of James Birch is also omitted, reduced to text-only postscript as a prelude to the final credits. Overall, the movie 12 Years a Slave does a better than average job of portraying the content of its source material, but there are too many creative licenses taken in the film to trust it as a reliable substitute for reading Northup's memoir. So, actually, if I were you, and if I had as much time as you have now, because you have approximately like 1 month of this quarantine, so I would read the full text of the book. Even though the bookshops are closed, I guess you can order it from the online DNR or whichever service you have, book service. The book is not very expensive as far as I remember, and also you can watch the movie 12 Years a Slave, but I would be a bit careful with watching this movie with a company. Okay, so it's your voluntary homework. If you want, you can do it. If not, then not. But if you are interested in the topic of this slave narrative and how this theme is represented in modern literature, you can also read this novel, The Underground Railroad, written by modern African American writer, and it's pretty interesting, pretty, I would say at times pretty dramatic, at times pretty entertaining. Try it can also be found here in Turkey. You can order and buy it. It's not very difficult and not very expensive. Okay, so as for now we are done for today. See you tomorrow. Okay, bye.